Hey, on this episode of Gen X Amplified, it is all about ed tech and the learning economy, specifically democratizing leadership development. That is because I am joined by none other than Stephen Bailey, who is the co-founder and CEO of ExecOnline, a corporate training company that is on a mission to connect all leaders to their future potential. All right, so make sure you get ready to get empowered and inspired. So, are you ready? Let's do it.
What if we could take some of that business model that had been applied to the broader consumer world, build a B2B leadership development focused version of that? And so that was the initial aha.
Welcome to Gen X Amplified, where we bring you inspirational and entertaining conversations with successful Gen X leaders and entrepreneurs.
This is the show created just for you. The powerful generation between the boomers and millennials to help you amplify your story,
Maximize your impact,
and become Gen Exceptional in business and in life.
Now, here's your host, Adrian Porter.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Gen X Amplified, the podcast dedicated to amplifying and giving a voice to the very powerful and exceptional generation of leaders between those brilliant boomers and magnificent millennials. All right, so my guest today is the CEO and co-founder of ExecOnline, a corporate training company that partners with the world's top business schools to offer leadership development on demand to enterprise organizations. Now, ExecOnline is on a mission to connect all leaders to their future potential by disrupting and democratizing corporate learning. Now, prior to co-founding ExecOnline, he served as the CEO of Frontier Strategy Group, a software and information services business. Now, he has been recognized and rewarded for many of his efforts, including being named the Entrepreneur of the Year by EY, Ernst & Young, in 2022 for the New York region. And under his leadership, ExecOnline was named Forbes America's Best Startup Employer in 2022 as well. So without further ado, please welcome a true ed tech pioneer and champion of the learning economy, the fabulous Stephen Bailey. Stephen, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I hope I can live up to it.
You will. I'm sure. I've been following you. I've been featuring you as the spotlight in Fabulous Over 40. I know you can live up to it. So first of all, I'm excited for you to be here, and I'm excited to have this conversation. I myself am a passionate advocate of the learning economy based on what I do, focused on mid-career executives and what have you. But what you have been doing, Stephen, with ExecOnline is simply phenomenal. It is needed, and we're going to talk a lot about your high impact initiatives. But first, as I always like to do with Gen X Amplified, is to go back and just kind of dig into the narrative and the journey of what led you to co-founding ExecOnline. If you can just kind of start with just quickly like that journey, and then we're going to unpack some of those current efforts, if you will.
Yeah, so born and raised in New Orleans, Louisiana, which I always have to start with. My family's still there. I make it back at least two. My mom says not enough times a year. And so I left New Orleans to go to undergrad at Emory University. Okay. And then I went to Yale Law School. And so I always start with, I'm a recovered lawyer. I was at a law firm just long enough to realize that wasn't where I was going to plant my flag. I was at WilmerHale in DC. And I left to join a startup, Frontier Strategy Group, which you mentioned, as the first hire of that company way back in, it seems like forever ago, but back in 2006. Okay. And I ended up ascending to CEO. I initially ran our product. I was chief operating officer, and then was CEO of the business. It had some really nice success there. That company focused on emerging markets, and in particular, helping companies optimize their performance in those emerging international markets. And I learned a lot about the talent challenges that organizations face at scale, as global organizations in particular, which was always a kernel. And that kernel ended up becoming ExecOnline. Because the other thing I learned, I traveled all over the world. We hosted events and roundtables everywhere. And we would bring senior leaders together in cities as diverse as Sao Paulo or London or Singapore. And time again, what I saw in those rooms was a lack of diversity, both no matter how you looked at it, from a gender, from an educational background, race. And ultimately, the combination of the need for organizations to improve their leadership development, combined with the lack of diversity, led me to say, what if we could reimagine leadership development as something that wasn't just for the few? And what if we could do that by bringing it online for the first time? And so back in 2012, when we founded ExecOnline, the idea was, if you wanted access to a top university, particularly a business school type of experience, you had to go on campus.
Right.
And if you were a company and you were thinking about developing leaders, you needed to do it in person because leaders were difficult to engage online. And so we set about changing that perception and that reality with the mission of connecting our leaders to their future potential, as you mentioned. And we did that by partnering with top business schools to reimagine leadership development as something that could be delivered in a high quality way online.
Right.
And convincing companies that in addition to touching many more leaders, they could also have an experience for those leaders that was at least as good, if not better, than what you could do in person. And that's what we've set about doing since the earliest days. We've matured our offerings and added our own proprietary programs, our own coaching capabilities. And so we now offer a one-stop shop, so to speak, for all leadership development with the goal of democratizing access in a really high-quality way.
Wow. Well, thank you. That was very groundbreaking. Just thinking about it. So you said 2012 when you and your co-founders, were some of these co-founders or co-founder coming over from FSG or?
Yeah, great question. So co-founders, one was from my time at FSG.
Okay.
Julie Alexander, who's our chief product officer for a number of years. And then I recruited the other two co-founders through my network, head of sales, Mark Ozer for a number of years, and then Barry Goldberg, who is our chief technology officer today. And folks joined at different stages.
Right.
So I kind of came up with the idea and then over the course of about a 12-month period, brought those folks on to the journey with me. And they've been incredibly instrumental in helping build the company we have today.
I'm just curious, when you were thinking about this new great idea, especially considering the timing, this is pre-pandemic, this is when everyone's on Zoom, this is when online learning became a thing of the thing, if you will. Was it just like an aha moment? Were you in a meeting? Were you in a conversation about business? Like how did the light bulb moment go off when you had the seed of the idea, if you will?
That's a great question. And I'm always curious. My mom's a psychiatrist. I've always been interested with the mind.
Yes.
But, how these ideas come together is anyone's guess. But what I would say is there were some different nuggets from my time, as I mentioned, at FSG.
Right.
I actually put some of those nuggets together on a walk that I was taking in Harlem one day. So I lived in D.C. when I was the CEO of FSG.
Right.
I left FSG with the goal of starting my own company. I took a little bit of time off to figure that out. And I moved to New York. My dad's from New York. And so it was always sort of a dream to live in the city and still live part-time in New York today. And so that walk, I remember in Harlem, which is where I still live, ended up being a very fateful walk. And I was just sort of thinking about what I wanted to do. There were all these ideas floating around in my head. And it was just sort of like, oh, what if we did this? Right. And this was at a time when you had, for the first time, companies that were partnering, for-profit companies that were partnering with not-for-profit universities. So think like a Coursera, for example, was sort of a pioneer there. But there really wasn't anything for the corporate space. And there wasn't anything devoted to leaders, which it was still the view that you really need to develop leaders in person. And so the idea was, what if we could take some of that business model that had been applied to the broader consumer world, build a B2B leadership development focused version of that.
Right.
And so that was the initial aha. I began a series of conversations with folks from my network. I reached out to executives who were clients from FSG to vet it by them. I reached out to investors that I knew. I would talk about it all the time with folks who I thought would have a perspective. And just started to gain confidence through those conversations that we were onto something. But obviously a lot between that initial kernel and how we actually were able to bring that first product to market. But you're right, it was at a very different time. A lot of the challenges we faced early on were geared toward a lack of knowledge of online learning and what it really meant, as well as a very different technology landscape, which you sort of alluded to. So to give you a sense operationally, one of our biggest challenges when we launched our first program in 2013 with Berkeley was actually getting online live video to work consistently, not for hundreds of people like Zoom, but even for a 6 or 8 person session, right. It was always kind of a fly by the seat of your pants exercise. And when you're doing that at scale across many sessions and hundreds and then eventually thousands and tens of thousands of leaders, that 2013 landscape was very different than kind of what we take for granted today. And that's just one example of many of the twists and turns we have to figure out along the way.
Yeah, I know it is. Wow. That's is going back to that, the initial seed, if you will, the walk in Harlem. So I used to live in New York as well. I'm actually from the South. I'm in Atlanta now, so a la Emory. But I lived in New York throughout my 30s, in Brooklyn, by the way. But Harlem is so beautiful, and I love it up there. But you ever think about aha moments in Harlem and wine bars, things that change your life, nuptials, wine bars, meeting your spouse? I'm doing my little research, but you ever think about these little settings and aha moments that literally change the trajectory of your life? And I love it.
And I will say, I would be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity to say the only thing more important than coming up with the idea for ExecOnline in Harlem was meeting my wife in Harlem, who is an amazing chef. I was runner-up on Top Chef, was executive sous chef at Le Bernardin, long time, sort of also was exec chef at Red Rooster, which is a restaurant that's very famous in Harlem.
Yes.
And so we're very much a Harlem couple and have a very Harlem story. So it's amazing when you think about the, kind of twist and turns of life. I was living in D.C. before I moved to New York. When I started ExecOnline, I was always wondering, would I live in New York at some point? As I mentioned, my dad was from there and I spent a lot of time there and was always looking for the opportunity to potentially make that move. And to now fast forward and think about how important New York and Harlem in particular has been in my life since that decision. It's hard to imagine that it would have worked out any other way. I love it.
I love it. Business and cuisine, a Harlem story coming to a theater near you. I love it. See, I'm a creative. But so thinking about this company, ExecOnline, thank you for the story, Stephen. And we're going to unpack more of current initiatives. But I'm just wondering, obviously, the route, let me take a step back. There's always been learning and development in organizations. A lot of it had to do with in-person workshops, what have you. The decision was made to have this at scale. And I'm assuming, obviously, this is a VC-backed or venture-backed organization. And so I'm sure
That's
there was
correct.
some, maybe not have been challenges or may have been challenges. I'm just, that's always top of mind when it comes to entrepreneurship and the founder journey. When you were approaching the seed stage, how difficult was it to receive funding? Were there challenges, especially when it comes to ed tech? And just kind of take me through that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. The short answer is you better believe that we're right. For a couple of reasons. I think, you alluded to ed tech. So ed tech has kind of come into its own as a space.
Right.
And I think there's still a lot of exciting maturation to happen in the space, but the progress since 2012 has been significant. I think there was a lot of skepticism around ed tech business models. A lot of the ed tech business models that did exist at the time were almost exclusively B2C.
Right.
Or if they were B2B, they were more pre-K through 12 focused on types of places. We were selling to school districts and those sorts of things. But the idea of an ed tech company with an exclusively B2B focus was still relatively new.
Right.
Which is what makes coming up with great new ideas exciting. But the challenge is also bringing people along with your vision.
Right.
And so the first thing I did when we raised money, and we raised an initial seed round of about $750,000. Okay. Kaplan Ventures, always been eternally grateful to them. They were our lead for our initial seed round and put in about a quarter to a third of the capital for that round. And once you have a name like that, getting the rest of the round filled out became a lot easier. But what I started with, and this is advice I always give to founders, is don't feel like your first fundraising conversations, particularly when you're raising seed money, need to be buttoned down presentations on a business. In fact, I think it's better when they're not. Because ultimately in a seed round, as much as you're going to put together decks and you're going to have my TAM is really large right. and no one's ever done this before and I'm going to make you $1 gazillion types of conversations, the main thing that's happening is that investors are betting on you, or they're betting on the co-founder team because they've all seen enough to know business models change, pivots happen. Fundamentally, they're evaluating, yeah, you have a good idea, but ultimately you're the type of person who's going to be able to execute and figure out how to find the opportunity because it's almost certainly going to be different than your initial thesis when you go to market. And so to that end, what I advise is when you reach out to people initially, don't even say you're pitching. Say you have a business idea, you want to get their feedback.
Okay.
Have some conversations that take the pressure off, because when you're pitching, you're not listening in a lot of cases. And early on, the more smart people who have their eyes on your idea and give you feedback, the better, right? And so if you frame it up as a conversation, then you do two things. One, you learn a lot.
Right.
Secondly, you get people on the same side of the table as you, and you get them some investment in your idea, and they see themselves in it. So then if you come back to them in a few months and you've refined the idea and they see their advice sort of reflected in what you've refined, all of a sudden they feel like, wow, this is someone I really want to invest in. They've taken my feedback. They've already made progress. They've moved the ball down the field. Right. And often the biggest thing you can do in a seed round is show your ability to make progress in a short period of time, because that's what entrepreneurship is all about. So if you can run your process that way, then I think you end up getting to a better place, because most of the fundraising conversations I had, the first conversation was, would love to just share an idea with you and get your feedback. Maybe the second or third conversation was, I'd love for you to invest in this business. And the folks that invested typically were those who had sort of been there for some front row seat over a few months as the idea kind of got refined.
Well, thank you for that. That's interesting. So the will you invest wasn't the first ask, and that's actually some good information. A lot of people in the audience and people that I serve who are kind of in the mid stages of their career journey, and they're looking to pivot and possibly start a company, whether it's a lifestyle or whether it's venture back. It's always kind of good to get those nuggets of the best way to approach investors and think about your audience and just have a conversation at the beginning stages. Interestingly enough, I'm thinking about, so ExecOnline venture back, and I would be remiss if I didn't recognize, there aren't a lot of venture-backed companies that have been founded and led by African Americans. So I'm always want to give kudos to that, especially at scale. And so whenever I see case studies and witness case studies such as yours, it's always great to spotlight those efforts as well. As you approached your partnerships with the B schools, curious, how was that? Because this is something, literally, this is a disruptive. There aren't a lot of organizations that they do learning development, professional development, but hey, we're going to bring the B school curriculum to the organization at scale. That's pretty disruptive. How was that journey as far as the outreach to the business schools and having them say, hey, here's our curriculum, to release the reins, if you will? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I want to make sure I circle back on your point around the lack of representation of African Americans in venture, in entrepreneurship. It has gotten a little bit better in the years that I've been in kind of the entrepreneurial game, but there's still a lot more progress, and we have a lot more progress to go than we've made.
Yes.
And the number of meetings I have with Black venture partners almost never happens. And the number of times I'm sitting in a room with, to your point, a Black tech founder who has gotten a business to scale is way too rare. And there are certainly success stories that we should tout, but not lose sight of the bigger picture, which is we have a lot more progress to make. So I want to actually give out a shout out to the Black Venture Institute.
Oh, great.
Which is a great, if anyone's sort of mid-career and thinking about moving either into the investment side or thinking about moving more into the entrepreneurial side, Black Venture Institute, which is a partnership with Berkeley and a good friend of mine, Toby Stewart, who's one of the top innovation strategy professors in the world. I've been involved in the Institute since the earliest days as a faculty member, and it's one of the most powerful contributions. A lot of stuff that happened post George Floyd kind of was flash in the pan and went away. This is one of those things that has been institutionalized, a number of cohorts, really impressive people, and lots of success stories of folks who've been able to use that opportunity to take their career to the next level.
Thank you for that.
So I'll start by sort of giving that little plug.
Great.
Encourage anyone who's interested to apply.
Thank you.
But then the second thing, to answer your question, yeah, you're right. I mean, this had never been done before.
Right.
And what we were doing was effectively working two sides of the market. So we're talking to companies about what could be when it comes to getting access to these great business schools. And what they would tell you is, yeah, that sounds really interesting, but we're not going to make that happen.
Yeah.
We're not going to, we can't go to these business schools and say, develop this online and go through all of that innovation solo. But if you can make it happen, we're open to listening. And so we use that to then go to schools. And at this point, I was still a one-man show. I was starting to have some conversations with my co-founders, but I'm a very big believer of just like mix it up. I just reached out cold to all the deans of top 10 business schools.
Wow.
The ones who replied introduced me to this role that I didn't know existed, which was head of executive education.
Okay.
At these schools. And these are the folks that run their non-degree certificate programs, as opposed to the MBA programs. So we focus on the non-degree certificate side. And as I start to have conversations, once again, look, this is about sharing an idea with you. I'm not coming to say sign on the dotted line today, right? But I want to share an idea with you. We started to hear, clients are starting to ask us about whether we can do something online, not in a way that's high pressure, but in a way that feels like there's opportunity here and is going to become more of an expectation over time.
Right.
And so what we said was, what if we could bring some customers to you and get this thing off the ground together and kind of bring the two sides of the market into alignment? And that's really the value that we played. And the key thing on the company side, and you'll hear a consistent theme here around how you get on the same side of the table with partners and customers. We didn't go to customers and say, here's a baked program, sign up for it. We said, we're creating a charter group of corporate customer advisors. We want you to help co-create this with us. We want you to make a very small commitment to be part of this group. At the time, I think it was $15,000 or $10,000 per charter member. And that gives you access to 5 people in the initial program that we're building. And oh, by the way, if we don't build it in the way that we're laying it out, you can walk away. You don't have to pay us now. Just if you like what you see, then you're in.
Yeah.
And we were able to take that back to the schools and say, look, there's real demand here. We've been able to aggregate these companies, once again, in a very short period of time. So they're monitoring progress. And are you doing what you say you're going to do, or are you just talking? And so that got us in the game with a number of potential partners, and ended up working initially with Berkeley, Haas Business School, as our first partner. And then Columbia Business School was fast to follow. But the ability to bring that corporate side of the market to the table really separated us. If we had just come with an idea or maybe a product demo and a deck, it would have been, we can, talk about it. Let's keep talking. Right. But the fact that there were customers here and money to be had in the immediate term got everyone galvanized around doing something together and doing it relatively quickly.
Wow. Thank you. Impressive. Love the approach. Love the idea of co-partnering, charter member, just the nuance of that conversation is definitely, it's a more inviting approach. And you're already helping to put moats around any possible resistance or increased resistance, especially as a startup. So let's talk about the learning economy and current today high impact initiatives, because as we know, technology is constantly disrupting. We're in the era of LLMs and Gen AI. And I know there's something that I've been very in tune to and passionate about, especially with what I do. Obviously with you and your team at ExecOnline, because the way we are learning has definitely changed. Can you just talk about ExecOnline's and your team's goals with respect to this current world of how does Gen AI affect the learning economy with respect to your clients, your customers, and how is ExecOnline is staying on top and leveraging this technology, if you will?
Yeah, great question. So maybe to give some context on our business model, so we're the first and continue to be the only leadership development company that offers a sort of annual SaaS license type of offering. So when a company buys from us, they have different options for different populations at different price points and across different modalities. So they can buy coaching from us or programs or some combination of both. It can be on demand. It can have live elements. So there's a lot of flexibility in the product based on what they purchase.
And not to interrupt you, just to clarify, so the coaching modality, so that you do offer, if someone has a thirst for one-on-one coaching, they can do that through the ExecOnline ecosystem?
So all of our coaching is done virtually.
I mean, virtually, but
yeah.
Okay.
But it's live coaching.
Live coaching.
And we match leaders with a coach. And so we enable all that through our platform. So if you're a leader, you come on, you tell us what you're interested in learning, what you're looking for in terms of logistics, like, time zone compatibility and availability for sessions. And then we give you a few different coach options. You can watch video thumbnails of that coach and then choose whichever coach you like and schedule everything directly with them. So it's all platform enabled.
Got it.
But fundamentally, once you're up and running, you get access to that coach for a year. You can schedule sessions whenever you like. It's very easy.
Oh, great.
And it's the same thing with our programs. Once you sign up, We sort of give you access to the library programs we offer. We offer about 120 different leadership development programs. And those programs can be either curated by the organization. So the organization can say we want to give them access to some subset, or they can say we're going to let the leader choose whatever they like. And that's important when you think about leadership development at scale and the potential of AI. I think there's been a lot of focus, rightly so, by the way, on AI content creation, because that's really the consumer use case now. We've all, worked with OpenAI or DALL-E or whatever it might be and created, content. Right. It's like, well, of course, there'll be content that's created for learning as well. The bigger, I think, more fundamental opportunity that we see, and I think it could apply both to individuals as well as to organizations. When you think about development at scale, the biggest challenge that our data suggests is actually choosing the right leadership development intervention. So if you're an organization, understanding what needs leaders have and businesses have, and then offering the right learning options based on those needs. And there's often a disconnect between what leaders think they need and what L&D might provide, right? And that really steps on engagement and makes leaders less likely to really lean in. And then if you're a leader and you want to choose, often some organization says, we'll let you choose. I mean, if someone comes to you today and says, what leadership development programs do you need? It's like, I don't know, right? So it's kind of, I know it when I see it, but I'm not going to be there to tell you I need these 4 programs, right? And so what I see is a really powerful use of AI, and this is what we've partnered with Amazon AI Innovation Center to build, and we're really excited about launching this over the coming months, is a AI assistant that helps organizations make the right decisions around how to curate leadership development for their leaders based on all the data ExecOnline has about the top leadership development needs based on the different characteristics of a company or of the leaders that you're looking to serve. And then on the leader side, once they gain access to ExecOnline through their organization, helping them select the right leadership development programs and coaching opportunities as we learn more about what they're looking to get out of the programs or the coaching. And so the big shift, if you think about where organizations have typically been challenged, that has been a very difficult thing to do at scale. Because if you're going to provide everybody with coaching on which leadership programs they should take, that takes a lot of human capital, a lot of money, a lot of time, and a lot of coordination. The ability to effectively put a learning coach in every leader's pocket so that they can make those decisions based on the best available data and insights for leaders similar to them, I think is going to revolutionize learning in a way that's even more than on the content side.
Oh, definitely. I love it. So the partnership with Amazon Innovation, is this a recent partnership? Well, LLMs are pretty recent, but I'm assuming, how long has this been in the works?
Yeah, so we've been working with Amazon over the last several quarters. And our team has been working directly with some of their top generative AI and broader AI folks. And they've been a great partner to us as we've looked to bring this very ambitious idea to life. And so we're very close in the coming months to actually bring that to market. And we think it's going to be a real step change, both in how organizations think about leadership development as well as individual leaders.
Wow. Well, I'm inspired and encouraged by that as well. Just thinking about, I focus a lot, I know you do too, on today's multi-generational workforce, and where there's up to 5 generations, of leaders or emerging leaders. Just curious, just based on your purview and the work that ExecOnline is doing with respect to knowledge share, intergenerational knowledge share, mutual mentorship, reverse mentorship. What is your stance on it? And what are some of the ways that your programs and solutions can help remedy or facilitate that knowledge share between an emerging, let's say, Gen Z and someone who has the institutional knowledge of a baby boomer or Gen Xer, if you will?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so I think one of the things that we work with organizations to understand is the place for different types of resources. So mentoring is really important, but it's not a replacement for learning.
Ooh, that's great.
One of the things you hear about in-person development opportunities is, people love to get together to learn in person. Well, actually, when you peel it back, what you find is it's less about the in-person learning. It's more about the networking and the connectivity. And so that's really important to understand the role that different interventions play.
Yes.
Right. And so mentorship is really important, for example, for helping individuals make connections to the right people that can be advocates for them as they advance their careers. When mentorship is working really well, mentors are also able to have honest and trust-based conversations with their mentees around areas for development. Now, this is where learning comes in. A mentor is not going to have the time or the expertise in a lot of cases to actually provide the training to close those gaps. They can help you identify. They can say, I've observed that one area that you can work on is improve communications, right, in group settings, right? And that's something that is invaluable for a mentor to point out. But to expect a mentor to then say, I'm going to then be able to make you a better communicator is up to the bridge too far. That's where coaching comes in. That's where programs come in. And so combining the right mentor relationships and programs with the right learning interventions to support advancement is really important. And the way we sort of see it is learning is a foundational element that you have to have, because if you create all of this demand for advancement, people are saying, yes, I'm having great mentor conversations, I'm having great connections, I want to advance my career. Then the question becomes, how are you going to help me do that?
Right.
And the how is learning.
Oh, that really appreciate, Stephen, distinguishing between learning and mentoring. I think that's really important because a lot of times people don't really bifurcate those two experiences and they think they're one and the same. But I think the way you just presented the difference between the two can optimize those relationships. If you're looking for a mentorship relationship, if you're looking for a learning platform, or there's ways to do both. That's great. So just kind of let's get before we wrap up a little bit personal, because I know you're in Harlem and I know you appreciate the arts and music as well. So this is a question I always ask all of my guests to even get beyond the CEO or the business person. Stephen, if there was a song that would play anytime you walk in a room or walk down Lenox Avenue or down the street that perfectly captures and illustrates you, your personality, your brand, what would be your own personal theme song?
Okay, so I want to be clear about one thing. I wax poetic about Harlem, but don't get it twisted. I'm from the NOLA.
Oh.
Okay, so I'm going to a different place. When I talk to, I know you're from Brooklyn, and you guys think you have the home of the greatest rappers and all that, but I'm talking NOLA. I'm talking Lil Wayne.
All right. Okay.
I'm talking Drake. I know he's under a little pressure right now, but I'm going 2010 right above it.
Right. Oh my God. Okay. Well, first of all, now, see, we don't even have enough time because right now there's a big conversation about the Super Bowl, New Orleans.
I have a lot to say about that.
I just saw Lil Wayne's video, and you mentioned Drake. Now you're bold.
Hey, look, Wayne, Drake, but most people don't know. Like, let's not
forget.
Bold. If you go back to 2008,
here we go.
Biggest rapper in the world was Wayne.
No, my son, my firstborn was born 2008, and I tell you, between Lollipop and all he owned the radio. He owned the streaming.
That's Carter 3 came out.
He owned it.
Changed the game. Lollipop, A Milli, all those great songs.
Yes.
And then let's also remember that that's the same time that Young Money put Nicki Minaj and Drake on. And so at one time you had Wayne ascendant and then at the top.
Yes. And
then by 2010, effectively what was happening is Drake was starting to eclipse Wayne. And much to his credit, Wayne has the sense of self to say, that's great, because I'm making money off of all of it. And so they do right above it. Great song, Changing the Guard. Like, if you talk about like entry music, I can't think of a better entry song than right above it. In fact, when we did our company offsite a few years ago in Arizona, that was actually my walkout song.
Right above.
Right above. So that's real life example, but great song, great energy. And on the Super Bowl, I'll say quickly, Kendrick's cool. I got nothing but love for Kendrick.
Here we go.
But you can't come to my city and put on a rapper who's not on the same level as the rapper from NOLA, Wayne, heart and soul, song for song, impact for impact.
This is great. Now I'm a music aficionado and just junkie, and we have to have a part 2 because we can have a whole conversation. So I love it. You know what? I can appreciate Lil Wayne, and it's good to hear this fresh take. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be an interesting performance. Yeah, my take is this: Kendra's hot. NFL is a business, but I believe yet that it could have been an overlooked opportunity. But we never know. There could be surprises. We don't know. He may show up.
Well, all I know is Kendrick better bring it. And I wouldn't be surprised if Wayne drops a mixtape or something just to let folks know what time.
I love it. Well, Wayne, Weezy, if you're listening, you heard Stephen. All right, you got to drop the mixtape. You have to drop the mixtape. Stephen, this has been great. We can talk literally for hours and just wax poetic. We can nerd out on learning economy, ed tech. I definitely feel it since and been watching your passion and the impact that you've been making as someone who's very passionate about professional development, especially for people in the middle, and which a lot of those individuals and professionals and leaders I'm sure that you serve, and what we're trying to do with Mid-Career Mastery. That's one of the reasons why I featured you as a Fabulous Over 40 Spotlight Leader. That's definitely the reason why I wanted to have you on and unpack and really get behind the narrative and all the great things that you and your team are doing. I'm a big fan of what Stuart and Des are doing with Thinkers 50. And I know that you all have a partnership with them. So can you let everyone know that's listening how they can continue to follow all the great initiatives that ExecOnline is doing, and for business leaders, how they can partner or schools or what have you? Just let everyone know how they can follow you and also ExecOnline.
Wonderful. I appreciate the opportunity, and thank you so much for bringing me on and reminding me that I'm Gen X. And my wife and I actually have she wants to be Gen X. She doesn't want to admit that she's a millennial, but she was born in 1981. I was born in 1979. And my argument is the cutoff for Gen X is 1980.
It is.
She claims it's 81, but I think that seems a little self-serving to me. But anyway, I digress. I don't know if you have a dog in this fight, but if you could put in an opinion on this.
Well, my quick opinion is I tell people, and again, when it comes to generational conversations, it's here or there. I always cite PEW Pew Research, which is born 1965 birth year up through 1980. So millennials start at 81. That's what they recognize in the census. But I tell people all the time, if you went through high school without Google, you can claim Gen X. We can bring you on. So your wife probably.
I'm gonna leave that last part out, and I'm just gonna send her to Pew.
Send her to Pew. Let her see the data. But yeah.
Yeah. But to answer your question, it was really great to be on, and thanks for the opportunity. If you want to continue to follow me and follow ExecOnline, LinkedIn is the best way. We post a lot of our updates and content and what's to come there. And always reach out to us directly via either LinkedIn or our website. We'd love to talk to you about how we can support your leadership development journey. Yeah,
definitely. So definitely follow ExecOnline, follow Stephen. He has been great. I actually was made aware of him through another awesome person, Miss Mac McKelvey.
Love Mac.
Yes, Mac is awesome. And when she introduced what you've been doing into my world, I was immediately drawn. I've been encouraged and inspired, and trying to get to where you are eventually, but just trying to create impact. But again, truly an inspiration. Thank you so much for spending time with me, Stephen, and our Gen X Amplified audience.
Well, thank you so much, Adrian, and congrats on all the success, and continue to do the great work that you're doing.
Thank you so much. Take care. All right, another great Gen X Amplified conversation. Thank you so much, Stephen Bailey, co-founder and CEO of ExecOnline. Thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. That was fun. I loved hearing about your journey. I loved hearing about how the genesis and the beginning stages and the seeds of ExecOnline, how it started. And I tell you, as I mentioned to Stephen in our conversation, I am inspired and encouraged with the problem that Stephen and the ExecOnline team is solving in the world of work with respect to leadership development, upskilling, ensuring that everyone, no matter your age or your stage, is connected to their future potential through learning and development. Thank you so much, Stephen, for joining me. And for everyone that's listening, please make sure that you keep up with Stephen Bailey on LinkedIn. Follow him on LinkedIn. Also follow ExecOnline for all of their initiatives, and continue to listen and support and share and subscribe to Gen X Amplified, the podcast dedicated to the powerful and exceptional generation between those brilliant boomers and magnificent millennials you know over here at Gen X Amplified and at Mid-Career Mastery. We are all about ensuring that everyone, no matter your age or your stage, is in a position to maximize your impact at work and on the world. Again, thank you so much. And remember, if you are enjoying this podcast, please go over and give us a great rating and a review on Apple Podcast or Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you again so much for listening to Gen X Amplified and for joining the movement. Until next time, take care.